3 of the urinary system lecture. It's going to be pretty brief today. I just want to talk about the process of forming urine because there are 3 main steps to the formation of urine, and we actually have talked about the first of these 3 steps already. So we left off the other day talking about nephron anatomy and essentially going through the different parts of the nephron, and actually that was largely involved in all of these 3 steps, but only generally mentioned the first. So let's break this down. So in order to make urine, we need to do 3 things. We need to filter out the blood, and that's the step really that we talked about in part 2 of this lecture. We filtered out the blood right here. Step 1, glomerular filtration. That happens in the glomerulus or in our Bowman's capsule, our toilet bowl in our analogy. All right. Here's the thing though. The problem with step 1 is we both filter out too much and too little all at the same time. So I'm going to dive deeper into that in one moment. But we are going to need, we do end up filtering out things that we want. And so we need to take them back into the bloodstream. And that is called reabsorption. Most of that happens right away in the proximal convoluted tubule or the PCT, but some of that can happen throughout in the loop of Henle and the DCT as well. And then lastly, that first step, not only do we get rid of too much, but we also don't get rid of everything that we want to get rid of. So some waste product ends up in the efferent arteriole that continues down, and we're going to continue to get rid of that into our big long tube, our pipe, throughout the rest of the nephron, and that is called secretion. Most of that happens not in the PCT but in the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. But again, you can have some secretion throughout the entire length of the nephron. So we're going to start with filtration. I'm just going to go over the general gist of what filtration is. I think this picture is pretty cool. I just wanted to show you that remember, if this is the glomerulus here, this big ball of capillaries, you could see it kind of in a cartoon image up here. This is actually what those little filtering cells look like with an electron micrograph. Just really, really cool. You can kind of see that these cells are really a lot like, almost as if you were to interlock the fingers on your hand and use your hand then to filter something. That's kind of what these cells do to filter your blood. So here's what's really cool. Every single minute, about a quarter of your body's blood is filtered. So your body also filters about 50 gallons or 200 quarts a day, which is pretty hilarious since your body only contains 5 pints of blood. But it's just refiltering it over and over and over and over again. Most of this happens in that Bowman's capsule. Here's the biggest thing though that you need to take away from this. As I said just a moment ago, this process is non-selective. Now what this means is that everything, as long as it's small enough to fit through this simple squamous epithelium, everything small enough should be able to pass into our Bowman's capsule, this crescent wrench shaped structure. Now, there are things that are too big. Blood cells are too big. Protein is too big. But anything small enough, water, glucose, amino acids, they'll pass through. And as I just said, water, glucose, and amino acids, whoops, sorry about that. You want those things, so we're going to reclaim them in the next step. There's a couple other things that you should know. I just mentioned some of this, and that's that anything small enough will get filtered through. That's our first bullet point here. But that large structures like blood cells and proteins are not going to be filtered out. You should never have blood or protein in your urine. Obviously you would know if you have bloody urine because it would appear an orangish color, and that could be indicative of lots of problems here at the glomerulus, but also, further on down with kidney stones and whatnot. But proteins in the urine too are another telltale sign that you have something wrong, because proteins should not be able to pass through the glomerulus. They are too large. Amino acids, on the other hand, those building blocks of proteins are small enough that they can pass through. Anything that is able to pass through ends up in our Bowman's capsule toilet bowl structure and quote unquote gets flushed down the rest of the tubule. So let's now talk about step 2. Step 2 is reabsorption, and reabsorption, as I mentioned earlier, is essentially the taking back of desirable substance that we accidentally flushed in the first step. This is going to mostly happen again in the proximal convoluted tubule, and lots of things are reabsorbed. This is pretty easy if I gave you a list of things to know what's reabsorbed, because they're going to be things your body wants, right? You're going to things like water, vitamins, minerals, glucose, amino acids, ions. All of these things are things that your body needs to maintain homeostasis, and your body wants them back. So if they got flushed, you're going to go back and try to get them, mostly again in the PCT. Well, your nephrons will. All right, it is important to note that most of this is actually a passive process, which is pretty interesting. That means it requires no energy. Some of it, though, is active. Oh, sorry, some of this is passive. I apologize about that, but most of it is active. I mentioned this actually, I believe, in the first part of this series on the urinary system, in that you burn a lot of calories filtering your blood by processing your blood and constantly cleaning it. And a lot of that happens here during the reabsorption step.
Now, right there.
Bentley, you need to go away, please. Daddy's doing a lecture. Sorry about that. Certain materials are not reabsorbed, and those materials are mostly nitrogenous waste products like urea, uric acid, and creatinine. And all of these are heavily rich in nitrogen. The first of which is a byproduct of the breakdown of protein as you're eating it. That's urea. That's actually what urine is named after. And then also when you break down DNA or you break down muscle tissue, both of those create nitrogen-rich waste products that you need to flush as well. Those will not get reabsorbed in this step, because that's part of the reason why we're cleaning the blood in the first place, is to get rid of them. So we don't want to take them back. And if you're drinking an excessive amount of water, you're not going to take that back either, because you have enough. You have too much, actually. So you're going to flush out all that excess water. All right, the next and final step, step 3, is secretion. So secretion is the exact opposite of reabsorption. If reabsorption is taking back desirable substance, secretion is taking back, or is further eliminating undesirable substances that weren't filtered out in step 1. There are a lot of things that get secreted, and these are things that are opposite again of step 2. These are not things that you want. These are things that you want to get rid of. Things like hydrogen ions, potassium ions in greater amounts, creatinine, uric acid, urea, drugs, toxins. All of these are bad. Hydrogen ions, for instance, remember the pH scale is actually determined by the presence of hydrogen in that liquid or substance. And the more hydrogen, the lower the pH, or the more acidic something is. So if you are unable to flush hydrogen ions, just that one of these 6, if your body is unable to get rid of hydrogen ions, your bloodstream will slowly start to become more and more acidic, and that would end up killing you. So all of these things in great quantities lead to deleterious effects on the body, and so your body wants to get rid of them. And anything that is secreted, all of this, and anything that had ended up prior that wasn't taken back, all of that now is going to move to the collecting duct, and now we have urine. And that, folks, is it for today.